Okay, welcome to the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks show. My name is Patrick Present, alongside my partner Derek Lee. Derek, we're in the middle of summer. Hockey's a long way away. How are you feeling right now?
It's exciting. I think it's like a month and a half away from training camp, rookie camp, all that stuff. So, I feel like the summer, every year since I started covering the Ducks, it feels like longer and longer. And obviously some of that is because they haven't been in the playoffs, but it's just everything feels so much longer every passing year. So I'm excited for things to get going again pretty soon and looking forward to this season.
Yeah, everyone is away at their cottages for the summer, but we are still grinding. So we asked you for some questions for this little mailbag episode we're putting together and there were actually quite a lot of questions because this is a team that is pretty uncertain in their direction. I mean, we know where they want to go, but a lot is up in the air and will be determined once the first puck drops. So why don't we start with Ethan on Instagram, who asked a pretty big question to lead off. Who will be the leading scorer and how many points will he score in the 2025-26 season?
This one that immediately came to mind, two players in my head, and that was Troy Terry and Leo Carlson. And Troy hasn't had quite maybe the scoring surge that he had when he kind of first broke through into the league. I think part of that has just kind of been like the guys he's played with, like Ryan Strome and Frank Petrano. Those were his two most common line mates, and those guys are respectable players, but they're not the type of first line guys that the Ducks really need. I think if like hypothetically, if you were to play Troy and Leo together, I think that would make for maybe a high scoring combo. I don't know if that's going to be how things kind of shake out. I think maybe we might see something like Chris Kreider and Mason McTavish with Terry, and then you keep Cutter Gauthier and Carlson and Alex Killorn together like they were playing together last season. So I think definitely though the potential for both of those guys to be the highest scorers on the team. I mean, both of those guys are going to be on the power play. Both of those guys are going to get plenty of ice time down the stretch, especially when it's a close game where they're needing to get a goal or two. So I think those would be my two candidates. As for points totals, um, that's tough because I think kind of the points total, I think uh, it kind of tells you where they're going to be in the standings. So I don't know if I want to
Hmm.
give that away, but let's go for somewhere in the 80s. I think that would be
Oh,
yeah.
wow, 80s. We like that. That would so if one of those guys lands in the 80s, I think there's a good shot that the Ducks are improving in the standings and pushing toward the playoffs. Uh, so you said my candidate here, and that's Leo Carlson. I think this is the year we saw it towards the end of the year as far as his production goes and how his overall game rounded out. I thought he was really putting everything together leading up to and after the Four Nations face-off. He's really starting to slow down and understand how to attack the middle of the ice and how to get to those areas and find teammates from those areas as well. And I'm not going to go to 80, but I will go to 68 points for Leo Carlson, and
All
that'll
right.
lead the Ducks. Um, all right, let's move on to Wade on Twitter asked, will Sam Colangelo get any time with the Ducks, or will all the old guys keep him out?
I mean, I think he's going to get some time. He's technically unsigned right now. There's that little debacle yesterday about
Hmm.
that he had signed, and then as well, he hasn't signed yet, and he hasn't signed. So, but I think that's going to be close. So he'll be on the team, obviously. It's really tough to say where he'll be in the lineup, though. He kind of moved around last season. He was up down in the AHL to start the season, spent most of the season in the AHL, and then spent the most of the back half on the Ducks. But then they brought in Mikael Granlund, brought in Chris Kreider, so that kind of pushes other guys down, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where he fits in the lineup. I think he can play a really big role, maybe as like a fourth liner, kind of like a high energy guy that can chip in a little bit of scoring. I think the way that things are set up this season, they could potentially have a really strong fourth line, especially kind of compared to how they've had things the last few seasons. So He's definitely going to get some time. How much time he gets, I don't know. Um, it'll be easier to say kind of once training camp starts because he was the one of the last cuts going into opening night last season. So I think he's got a little bit of an edge now compared to a season ago. So we'll see how things kind of go there.
Yeah, he has shown that he knows how to be successful at the NHL level. It's all about opportunity and seizing those opportunities now. He's 23. He's going to be 24 the day after Christmas, Boxing Day. So I think he will play in the NHL this season. There are bound to be injuries. The top nine, however, will be tough to crack, and it looks just looking at it, it looks pretty crowded right now. So unless you know, an opportunity has to present itself for him to kind of find himself in that situation. But as far as being on the roster, playing NHL games, I'd say, and he is waiver exempt as well, so he can go to San Diego without having to go through waivers. So if I were to hedge, I'd say about 50-50, like half his games in the NHL, half in the AHL, maybe some healthy scratches here or there, but I think there's a good shot he'll play the fourth line role, and I think he proved that he was pretty good at it. Like he's a decent forechecker. He can, you know, he's pretty good in his own zone as well. He's responsible, so I think I think he knows now what it takes to succeed and play an impact role up and down the lineup. So I think that's pretty valuable to the team. And if they can generate goals even from that fourth line, which is looking like one of the better fourth lines they've put together in quite a while, then I think he's going to make an impact at the NHL level. Absolutely.
All right, we got Duncan on Twitter who asked, do you think, well, actually, we had a couple of off-season questions. This one was, do you think this offseason was a success overall, assuming we signed McTavish? I've seen ESPN give us an A grade, but I'm still feeling underwhelmed, possibly because Verbeek and ownership set the bar kind of high with their comments. And then Ed on Twitter said, in your opinion, could Ducks management offseason efforts be considered successful? So basically, the offseason success or no?
So they did set the bar high, like Duncan was saying. Playoffs has been on the tip of everyone's tongue when they're assessing the Ducks in their off season. The roster left, the roster moves left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. I think they still had a lot of cap space to play with and just couldn't or didn't pull the trigger on any major moves. Mikael Granlund, I thought was a good signing, and obviously Chris Kreider will add some goals. And I really believe that, even though those guys are in their mid 30s now, that they have quite a lot left in the tank based on what we've seen in the last couple of seasons. Kreider had a pretty down year, mostly, in my opinion, due to injury, and trying to play through those injuries. But, and then the coaching staff, I think you have to kind of lump into this when you're kind of grading the off season. Um, they put together maybe one of the best coaching staffs in the NHL. I think there's a lot of question marks around Quenneville just because he's been out of the game for so long. But based on, the last games he did coach and his Florida Panthers team a few years ago, I think there's a lot to be excited about and very encouraging aspects that he can translate to this Ducks team. I think that looking ahead, I think they will be better as far as in the standings. I think they'll improve on their 80 points. How much, we don't know yet, obviously. An A grade might be a little high, but mm, if their goal is to make the playoffs, I don't know if I'd consider this offseason as of right now, even if they sign McTavish, to be a success. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's tough. Pat Verbeek always says it takes two to tango. So they missed out on Mitch Marner. They missed out on Nikolai Ehlers. They were able to bring in Kreider. They got Granlund, who I also agree. I thought that was a great signing. But other than that, I think a lot of their additions, quote, quote, is kind of just hoping that the natural progression of some of these younger guys like Jackson Lacombe had a great season. We mentioned Leo Carlson, Cutter Gauthier, those guys, is hoping that those guys can continue to progress and kind of build on their breakout seasons. You hope that guys like Kreider and Radko Gudas to some extent can kind of bounce back and play a little bit more like how they've played in the past. You also hope that guys like Pavel Minchikov, Owen Zellweger, those guys can kind of bounce back from the struggles that they had a season ago. So a lot of it's not like hoping. I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's like you got a pile of magic beans, because these are all good players, but you kind of want that track record that they don't necessarily have yet in the NHL. So a lot of that is just kind of hoping that they naturally progress. And so a lot of those moves weren't necessarily, oh, we're going to keep adding to our team. It's just, well, we have these guys now, and we want them to be the guys. And so hopefully they become those guys next season. So I think a lot of, especially for ESPN, that grade, I think it definitely had a lot to do with coaching, because you went from Greg Cronin to Joel Quenneville, and then you brought in a whole new set of assistant coaches, and they're highly experienced assistant coaches. I mean, you got Jay Woodcroft, who was a former head coach in the NHL, and then you got Ryan McGill, who has plenty of experience with New Jersey and Las Vegas, and then Andrew Brewer also, and then you have Peter Budaj and Tim Army, who were still on the staff before, and Peter Budaj has done a terrific job with the goalies. So, um, yeah, I would say more of that offseason grade from that perspective is definitely the coaching staff, because it's like you said, they added pretty much like maybe one of the best coaching staffs in the league. So I think right now I'd maybe give it like a low B, and then that's also just taking into account whenever McTavish and Colangelo and Washi all get signed. So yeah, low. I think I'd go low B.
That's pretty fair, I think. Um, yeah, okay. Moving on to Michael on Twitter. Ooh, okay. If the Ducks don't improve or improve by only about 5 points, will they fire Pat Verbeek? He's laid out his offseason goals every year and has never accomplished them. Also, I would have given Zegras 1 year with Coach Q, and even if he didn't improve, then maybe trade him then. Bummed he didn't get a chance with Q. Okay, a lot there, but let's just focus on the first part for Beak. Obviously, lofty goals. If he doesn't hit them, is he out?
I, yeah. If they only improve by 5 points, that's definitely not going to be enough to get into the playoffs. Especially you look at the benchmark. I think right now is maybe 95 points, because a lot of teams improved this offseason, at least on paper. And then even just you look at the playoffs from a year ago, like the wild card race, 92 points is not even really enough to get into the wild card. So you definitely need to get into maybe like the 98 point range to at least like guarantee a wild card spot. So going from 80 to 85 is definitely not really moving the needle very much. Um, for firing, I mean, if I was to be like really just explicit, if you're only improving by 5 points after a year where you said like playoffs is the goal, like, you should probably be fired. Because if you're setting that expectation and you didn't reach that expectation at all, I would say that you deserve to be fired. But I don't know, because it's weird, because you bring in new coaching staff, you bring in a couple new players, and it's like, okay, well, they need a chance to gel and all that. But like, how many chances do you get to keep saying that? Like, they just need a chance to gel. They just need this 1 year, and then the next year will be like the year, because that's what Ducks fans have kind of heard over and over. It's, oh, well, they just need this year, and then the next year will be fine. Like they heard it when Greg Cronin came in the first years. Oh, well, they have all these injuries. Next year will be better, and next year was better, but a lot of it was due to the goaltending and not really the players being utilized to their potential. So, um, I mean, if they don't improve, then yeah, I think he's getting fired, because you can't go from 80 points and less, and you made all these additions. So, um, I would say, yeah, like, like, you can't set the expectation of playoffs, miss playoffs, and then um, you get another chance. So I would say yes.
Wow. Okay. I think a lot of it will come down to how the team kind of goes about it. Like, were there injuries? There's always those kind of aspects, but again, you were the one who set the goal. Like, this wasn't like if Verbeek and ownership had come out and been like, "Oh, we just want to improve," I don't think this would even be a conversation. But like, you set the goal we're making or we were trying to make the playoffs. Not like be in a playoff spot, not play meaningful games down the stretch. We want to be in the playoffs. And but to go from 59 points to 80 points to 95 points in a 3-year span is lofty. Um, you know, I I don't I think if they don't improve, like if they don't get to 80, yeah, I think there's a higher likelihood than not that Verbeek would be because his contract is reportedly coming to the an end. Like we're near the finish line there. So I think a lot is determined here, and it's been 4 years now. And if the team is still struggling to kind of break into the conversation for playoffs, then yeah, I think it's time to maybe go in a different direction. Um, that said, if they improve by 5 points and they miss, they just miss out in the last week, I think there's a chance that Verbeek will return because they did play those meaningful games down the stretch and they put themselves in a position, I guess. But again, he was the one that set the goal. So I'm gonna stick with like I like the 85 point thing. Like if they don't get 85 points, it's a coin flip. If they don't hit 80 and they're 80 and under, I'd say he's gone. And then obviously anything above 85, he's back. So that's kind of
Yeah,
the
there's a
benchmark.
little bit of nuance to that because, like you said, like injuries and things like that.
Right. Yeah, it's all about, how did they play? Like, did they give up in the last week? Whatever. All right, let's move on to Twinkie Boy on Twitter asked, does Coach Q finish top two in Coach of the Year voting, Jack Adams? Um, you can go first.
Oh man, I have seen so many articles about just gambling odds for Jack Adams and Quenville. Um, I don't know because, well, I mean, I don't know. That's a cop out answer. I I would say, man, it is really tough. I would say no because I think they would have to do so like extremely well for him to be even like consideration for a top three. Because you look at like the candidates from past years, and I mean maybe I'm just not thinking of it right off the top of my head, but there's very few instances where a team does like super well after being like kind of just mid, where the coach like shoots into the top three for Jack Adams. Like it's usually a team that was already like on the cusp of playoffs and then they just become an absolute juggernaut. And I mean, I don't see the Ducks becoming an absolute juggernaut just straight out the gate from here. So I think I'm going to go no. I think he'll be like top five, but I don't think he'll be top two or top three, like a finalist for Jack Adams.
Yeah, the Habs made the playoffs last year and St. Louis didn't win, even though like he might have deserved it. Um, I think it's pretty simple. If they finish above a wild card spot, I think it's top two in voting for Quenville
Mm-hmm.
because that means that you're creeping on 100 points, which would be an 18-point improvement. And everyone says how hard it is to go from the bottom to mid, and then it's even tougher to go from mid to playoffs and contending. So, getting out of the or getting above a wild card spot, top three in the division means that you are a contender. Like you're a contender at that point, right? You're top six in your conference, top three in your division. So I think that's the scenario where he's top two in voting and maybe even top one. So I think that it boils down to that. And anything other than that, I am top five if they make the playoffs. And then anything other than that, no.
I agree with that. Let's see. From Trevor on Twitter, how likely is it for the Ducks to finish with more points than the Kings next year?
Oh boy, not very. If you just look at just their lineups, the rosters, the Kings are still relying heavily on Doughty and Kopitar to kind of drive their two-way impact. But the Kings I know that everyone is dunking on their off season and they didn't make a lot of great moves. They made a lot of moves, not a lot of great moves, but just looking at their lineup, it's pretty like there aren't many holes in the lineup that I can see. Their D is six deep. Their forwards are four lines deep. You know, Darcy Kemper's a Vezina candidate. I think as long as Kopitar and Doughty can stay at their levels that they've been at for their entire careers, and then I think there's a good chance that they are playing Edmonton again in the playoffs. Um, but yeah, if I were to put like a percentage that the Ducks end up higher than the Kings, it's pretty low, like 10%, 5% maybe. It's a tall order. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Ducks are definitely on the rise, but I think they still need another step or two to kind of get into that range of being like above, especially because the Pacific is so strong because you have Edmonton, Vegas, LA, and then you have other teams that are trying to get back into it, like Vancouver and Seattle's doing things, I guess. And Calgary was in the mix a little bit last year for the playoffs. Um, but yeah, it's going to be really tough to kind of finish above that, I guess, like that benchmark of being in the playoffs in the Pacific because the Kings have kind of been um, that model, I guess, of people looking at, well, they rebuilt because they got Byfield and they added all these pieces and they got back in the playoffs within like 6 years or whatever it was. So it'll be I think it'll be pretty tough for them to get more than the Kings unless there's just like a ton of injuries or something.
Always the factor. But yeah, the Ducks have a lot of question marks and the Kings have a lot of proven assets. And if as long as they don't fall off a cliff, I think that's a pretty lofty goal. All right, moving on. I like this question. This is a fun one. So this is from Depressed Angels fan on Twitter. Don't know if you have intel on this, but do you know if the Ducks plan on bringing back Brohim as the goal song?
I would say no. I think that they are really leaning hard into the Orange County influence and Offspring is a local band. They even changed the win song used to be Jimmy Eat World Sweetness, and they changed it to Hella Good by No Doubt is another local band. So especially just because of the whole rebrand, like they have the orange jerseys now, everything is orange country, orange this, orange that. So they're really leaning hard into the Orange County kind of thing. So I would not envision Brohim coming back. It's a great goal song. Like it was the goal song for the longest time. Pennywise performed at the Stanley Cup parade for crying out loud. But they're also Kings fans and they're from Hermosa Beach. So I think that the Ducks they kind of want to have their own identity and have everything rooted in Orange Country, and that makes sense too. Especially you compare it to the guys across the street, the Angels. It's like a complete 180. So yeah, I would not anticipate Brohim coming back in any form or shape. Sorry if that makes people sad, but that's just kind of the world we live in now. They want to work more with Offspring. They've had two Offspring nights now, so they're gonna just kind of lean more into this, have all the Orange County influences, work more with local brands and local businesses, which I think is great because you want to have that sense of community, especially when the team is starting to kind of be on the rise.
Yeah, they definitely went all in on the Orange County rebrand, completely leaning into that community and trying to, yeah, like you said, create an identity and community around it. So, yeah, it's no doubt an offspring for probably the foreseeable future. Um, which I don't mind. I like that kind of aspect of it. Be local. Cutter Gauthier was at the Offspring concert. They're not going anywhere. Like Offspring is part of the identity of the team moving forward. So, and I'm all on board for that. Even though Brohim, like you said, was great, but yeah, they are Kings fans. So I don't know if you want a Kings anthem going up every time the Ducks score. So,
All right.
uh,
We got Bird TR6 on Twitter. We had a couple of questions. First question was why is McTavish not signed yet? The second question is oh man, is Coach Quenneville dumb enough to put Alex Killorn or Ryan Strome in the top six? And then we'll go over the last question after. But Yeah, first, why is McTavish not signed yet? And will Killorn and or Strome be in the top six?
Okay. So why isn't McTavish signed? He isn't signed because Pat Verbeek likes to play these long games with his RFAs coming off of their ELCs who have no leverage, and he wants to get the best deal possible in his eyes, which typically is a bridge deal at as low a number as possible. Even though they have all the cap space in the world, even though it's probably smarter to sign these guys to 7, 8 year deals while you can at a low-ish number relatively to what their contract projects in the future. Think a la Jack Hughes, who signed an 8x8 before he really exploded. So that's kind of been the benchmark for a lot of these contracts, but Verbeek is kind of still old school in his ways where he wants players to earn it. And in his opinion, it seems like McTavish hasn't earned it and is willing, Verbeek is willing to grind McTavish in his camp into as much as he can in this month and a half before training camp, much like he did with Drysdale and Zegras 2 years ago. Obviously, those didn't end well, and we'll see how this goes. But basically, that's why McTavish hasn't signed yet, is trying to get as low a number as possible. And then for the Ryan Strome, Alex Killorn question, I think there is going to be a lot of shuffling, a lot of finding combinations that Quenneville likes, that Woodcroft likes. But I dislike, and I've said this before, I think, I just don't like separating into the top six, bottom six, even though that's what most teams do as far as how they construct their forward lines. I would much prefer a top nine and a fourth line. So, um, so I'd like three lines that can score and then have a fourth line to just, basically play even hockey. So, so yes, I think that Ryan Strome and or Alex Killorn will end up in the top six quite a bit, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think those guys can contribute. Ryan Strome, I think, is pretty. Honestly, I think the pendulum has gone so far the other direction. I think he's kind of underrated at this point. He's literally a shoe-in for 41 points a year, half a point per game, which isn't bad middle six production. And Alex Killorn, while the production hasn't really been what his contract lives up to, he was overpaid, but that's okay because again, the Ducks have had all the cap space in the world, and it kind of doesn't matter in my opinion that he's makes 6.25. But he is a really good line mate for guys like Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish, Troy Terry, Leo Carlson, obviously. He does like all the little things in the corners and battling and stuff that those guys need to learn how to do. So he's kind of a good shepherd in that aspect. So I don't subscribe to the hate that those two get. I think it's a little undeserved. Um that so yeah, that's what I got on those two. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it. I think the issue when it comes to guys like Strome or Klein, I think people just see that they kind of look at them as like guys that are weighing down the younger guys a little bit. But I think it's just like the way the team has been kind of set up the last couple of years. Maybe like I said before, like the guys weren't being utilized to their full potential. So I think you've like Strome is a really great playmaker. I think if you kind of have him with guys that can insulate him defensively, then it's a little bit easier to kind of look past maybe where his deficiencies are, and maybe you play them together, right? Because Killorn is really solid defensively. He's played on the penalty kill at times, and him and Leo were actually really great on the penalty kill at times this past season. So maybe that's something that they can explore. I didn't really have anything else to add on that aspect because you covered a lot of that. But for McTavish, it's really interesting because there's been like so much noise about like offer sheets and all that. I think some of that's kind of overblown just because everything is external and none of it's like, oh, well, we've heard this about Anaheim and all that. So I think people are just kind of bored. This is the off season. You got to drum up ideas. I understand why people are kind of worried about it being similar to Zegras and Drysdale because we're a month and a half out and there hasn't really been like any news or anything like that. But I think it's going to be a little bit different. I'm confident that they'll get a deal done at some point. I'm sure it'll be a bridge deal. I don't think it would be a long term. I don't personally think it's going to be a long term deal, even though I think if I was the one making the deal, I'd probably do long term. But I think right now it's looking like it'll be a bridge deal. But yeah, I don't know like how that negotiation is going to go, but I don't think it's going to end up as bad as Zegers or Drysdale did.
That's fair. Okay, and then the very last part. Do you want to do this little question at the end here?
The Korea one?
No, the about the top six
Oh
lineup.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
So agree or disagree, this would be the ideal top six combination. So first line he has listed Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlson, and Beckett Seneca on the right wing, and then second line would be Chris Kreider, Mason McTavish, and Troy Terry. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that is the best top six combo because, well, for one, you're putting your marquee free agent signing not in the top six, which we just talked about having a top nine. But I think if you're signing someone to $21 million or whatever the total was, you probably don't want them on the like the quote quote third line. So, and I think that's a lot of expectations to place on Beckett Seneca too. You're going to throw him like straight onto the top line right away before he's ever played an NHL game. So I'm going to disagree respectfully. I mean, I think you would hope that like if you have that kind of line in the future, that's fantastic. But I think right now, like Seneca needs to prove that he can just be on the NHL roster before you start throwing him into basically like 50 feet deep water right there by putting him on a line with Cutter and Leo. So I'm going to disagree with that.
Yeah, while that would be an incredibly fun line, and you know what, I would be fine if that's the top six to end the season. Were Beckett to make the team and stick. Um, But also, that is, yeah, like you said, a lot to ask of Beckett Seneca. It's also a lot to ask of Gauthier and Carlson because these guys are, 1 and 2 years deep into their own careers and they're trying to make impacts on both ends of the ice as well. And now you're asking them to play with a pretty volatile rookie. And like all rookies are volatile, but Beckett is such a wild card that it could end up great, but it could also he could also be an anchor were he to play with those two players. So I think you're asking a lot of those two guys as well to kind of play play alongside Beckett. And like I like that could be the line in the future that could dominate and would be great and we'd all love it. But yeah, that's pretty lofty coming out of the gate here. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to this question about Paul Correa, which is awesome. And then we're gonna take a break and then do a part two. So from Perry's burner account on Twitter, how many points would prime Paul Correa have in today's NHL?
See, I feel like I can't answer that because I never watched him play. I was like 10 years old when he retired. So
Eh,
um, uh, I think I'll let you go first.
okay. So I'll I'll give a little history lesson on me is I'm from LA. I'm from Glendale, which is like 15 miles north of Staples Center. And I should have been a Kings fan, but I loved the Mighty Ducks movies. And the thing that kept me as a Ducks fan was watching Paul Correa. He was electric in an era where, there was clutching and grabbing and two-line pass and, just watching him fly down the ice and rip slappers and the vision he displayed was incredible. And but then learning about his process throughout his career, uh, how he, on game days wouldn't walk upstairs because he didn't want his legs to get tired, type of thing. His dedication to his body was on the cutting edge and would have really translated in today's style. Now you put that player, if he was born in 1995 instead of 1974 or whatever he was born in, I think that player is maybe the best winger in the NHL right now. Like he would be on par with Kucherov and Pastrnak and Nylander and Marner and these kind of elite wingers, in my opinion. And his game would have translated perfectly, and his work ethic obviously would have translated perfectly. He was a student of the game. He was hockey 365 before it was cool to be so and necessary to be so. So, yeah, I think he's a 115 point player in today's NHL. And then obviously the injuries, and Paul Kariya playing in a game where you don't have to worry about getting hit from the blind side after you make an outlet pass, things like that. And, you know, and today's equipment too, like give that guy a stick that weighs as much as these sticks do today and the skates that these players are allowed to play with today. And I think you got an elite superstar winger.
All right, yeah. I think while I was listening to that, I think just the number that popped into my head was 110. Just for I don't know for whatever reason, but yeah, I mean, like you mean just him play is like just highlights is just incredible. Like the things that he could do, especially when they brought in Teemu Selanne and just the chemistry that those guys had, and then you had in Steve Ruchin as kind of like the complimentary finish to that group, and it was just fantastic. I'm sure like just watching them in person was an absolute blast to see.
Yeah. All right. So Derek and I are going to take a little break here, and then we're going to put out a part two as well because we still have a lot of questions to get to. So we thank you again for sending in all these questions. We will return with our part two. So stick around or look out for that.